Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of SUGTalks. I'm Craig Dale, your host, and together with our special guests we'll take a deep dive into the topics, challenges and opportunities facing SAP users today. Please make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss another episode. I'm delighted to be joined today by Ian Mallinson, IT Director at Warburtons and also Board Member, Director of UKISUG. So welcome Ian.
Hi Craig.
And today's episode is the latest in our series of interviews with senior IT leaders to hear about their career highs and lows, and plus tips for getting ahead and the challenges they've faced throughout their career. Now then, just before we get into that conversation, just a quick icebreaker question, Ian, if I may. And I thought we'd talk about TV adverts. Now, Warburton's been known for its celebrity adverts over the years with the likes of George Clooney, Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro, to name but a few, making guest appearances. So what I would like to know is, what is your favourite or most memorable TV advert? The one that comes immediately to mind to me while I'm asking that question is the Boddingtons one. Do you want a flake in that, love? That's the one that just brings to my mind Melanie Sykes in an ice cream van dishing out beer. What's yours, Ian?
Yeah, well, I'm tempted to use a Warburtons one. So I'll give two. I think my favourite Warburtons advert is the one with the Muppets. The giant crumpets one with Kermit and Miss Piggy, and I just think that was absolutely superb, and my kids loved that one. But I particularly like the one on the beer side. Wasn't there a Peter Kay one? Was it John Smith when he jumps in a swimming pool? Yeah. I love that one. So there's your answer. The John Smith Peter Kay one.
Oh, there's been a few of them as well. There was a Curry House one, wasn't there? Two more Lambooners over here, and then the Abbott one with a football. Yeah, brilliant.
And of course, he's featured in one of our adverts, being from Bolton as well.
Fantastic. Okay, moving on to the reason we're here today, really, and that's just to get us started, Ian. I just wanted to ask about your background and how you actually ended up in the field of IT and indeed SAP. I think it's fair to say that you didn't really come from a traditional IT background, so it'd be great to start there at the beginning, if we may.
Yeah, no problem. Probably an unconventional route. I used to introduce myself as the IT director with no previous IT experience. And at one point that was true. I can't really say that 7 years in, but I am relatively new to IT. I started my career with a degree in mechanical engineering, and I actually, my first job was working in the design team for a defence company, making the Challenger 2 tank. But I quickly realised I didn't really want to be in the design office. I wanted to move into the manufacturing area and led manufacturing teams making the components for the Challenger 2 tank. And I did a number of other manufacturing and site management roles in that area. But I decided that I wanted to move on to supply chain, so that my next step was to move into head of supply chain roles with a packaging business, actually making beverage cans. For the likes of Coca-Cola, Guinness, Carlsberg and so on. And I loved my time in supply chain. That's actually how I arrived at Warburtons. My first role in Warburtons 12 years ago now was as head of supply chain planning. And what a great supply chain that is, and we'll probably talk a bit about that later. So, it's only latterly in my career that the IT director role came up, and my heart actually skipped a beat. And I thought, could that work? So I talked to the CFO about that, and we debated it. Would that be right, and so on. And anyway, after actually quite an extended period of time where we entertained the idea, we decided we'd give it a go. Not because of my IT experience, naturally, but probably because of the business understanding that came from having worked in the supply chain role at Warburtons. And probably quite a lot to do with cultural fit, which is really important in our business. Anyway, 7 years later, I'm still in the job, and I think everyone involved has been happy with the decision that was taken.
Well, you certainly must be doing something right 7 years in.
Yeah, I'm still loving it, by the way. Just everywhere I look in Warburtons, there's just opportunities for digital. Yeah.
Kind of, I suppose, at this juncture with all the supply chain issues that have been kind of in the midst for the past, 18 months or so, and I assume that background has set you in good stead as well for the business Warburtons is in and making sure that it still continues.
For sure. I think the part I bring, I can't set up a network or a virtual server or anything of that nature, but I can help stand in the shoes of our supply chain colleagues and make sure that my team in IT are totally aligned. And through the crisis, we actually slowed down on a lot of change activity because it just wasn't the right thing to be doing. So where transformation and change activity reduced, we realigned our IT team to make sure, both in our bakeries and in our logistics network, that we were absolutely lined up to support the teams through that 2-year period.
Okay. And how big is your team at Warburtons?
We're around 14 size, sometimes up, sometimes down, and split across 3 main functions: IT operations, so networks, data centres, devices, servers, security, that type of thing. SAP basis, of course, in that. And IT applications, with a team of IT, business-facing IT business partners and business analysts that have expertise in most areas of SAP, but also working on non-SAP applications as well. And thirdly, a small PMO, program management office, just a small PMO team that just ensures we manage the change and improvement side of our delivery effectively.
Okay, and would you say there are any particular IT challenges linked to working for an organisation that produces a lot of perishable goods, perhaps with a limited shelf life? I mean, you've obviously moved from tanks to crumpets, so challenges there.
It's a massively high volume high velocity supply chain, I should say. There's challenges and benefits to having a supply chain like that. Because we're daily fresh, the good news is we don't need to worry too much about complex stock control. As we're daily fresh, we turn our stocks over every day. If you look in our warehouses at 4:30 in the morning after the delivery vans have left, our warehouses are empty. So in that sense, simple. But on the other side, the challenge is, again, we don't have stock. So we go from raw materials to the supermarket shelf, typically within 24 hours. It's so important we do that for freshness. So system uptime, stable system functionality is absolutely key. We don't have any safety stocks to lean on. And the other thing I would say, because we're direct to store every day for freshness, it means we're delivering to between 10 and 15,000 stores every day. And I sometimes describe that as being like a parcel delivery service, but we're baking the parcels from scratch every day.
Yeah. Hence why we see a fair amount of Warburtons lorries on the roads.
Yeah, exactly. I think we got our fleet is probably 900 vehicles, somewhere in that order. So yeah, it's quite a logistics undertaking. But we think it's important to deliver direct to store for freshness, to go straight from our bakeries and depots directly to the supermarket shelf.
And obviously, we touched on your background in the supply chains and how that can support in the challenges that's been around in 18 months. And how has that background helped you when working with SAP in this business?
Yeah, well, before I joined Warburtons, I had 2 or 3 previous supply chain roles, and those organisations were SAP customers. So I had a pretty good understanding as to how SAP can be used to manage supply chains, but from a business user perspective, not from an IT perspective. But I guess what that also told me is what SAP might be less good at or less able to do. And the challenge was when I came into Warburtons, even before I took the IT role, was it was clear to me some of the unique challenges of being daily fresh in this kind of stockless environment where there's, orders are coming in every day, there's this kind of in-week seasonality going on, that SAP alone was not enough, and we've needed to graft on some best-of-breed non-SAP applications on top of that, on top of our SAP core. But we found that works quite well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, excellent. And so we're looking at that and then looking to the future. If you project forward, what are your future plans for SAP at Warburtons?
Okay. Well, we're currently running Business Suite on HANA. So we made the HANA step probably 5-6 years ago now, and not really any functionality benefit, but it certainly speeded the system up. And we have billions of transactions every day, so that helped. So we're on HANA. But the logical next step for us is to move to S4, and we are in the process of planning a brownfield migration. We'll migrate what we've got across to S4 HANA. And that's a project that we'll launch shortly. We're actually going for the investment needed for that next week. So hopefully after next week we get the nod and we'll be on our way. So if we do that, we'll run that S4 migration over the next 12 months. And at this stage, though, the aim is to really just keep that as much as possible, to do a technical migration, get across, get it all stable, and then work to take the value and the benefits from the move to S4 as a subsequent step. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's our core. Outside our core, we have recently implemented SuccessFactors and Commerce Cloud and Sales Cloud, and we took that's in. They're working. But there's more functionality in there that we can get at. So what the other, in terms of SAP, the other things we'll be focusing on is extracting more value and more functionality out of those cloud solutions over the next couple of years.
Interesting. It quite rightly so as well. It's it talked earlier about adoption and things, and talking about moving to S4, already implemented others, and getting that value is crucial to the business, and focusing on that is I think vital to the future of getting more return on that investment in SAP.
Hi, we're the UK and Ireland SAP user group. Did you know we're a fiercely independent not-for-profit? Did you know we're a vibrant community of over 6,500 SAP users? And did you know we help each other by sharing resources, championing education, and influencing SAP's future development? Well, you do now. If you'd like to get the most from your SAP investments and be in the know, visit our website, sapusers.org/pod. We hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast.
And just kind of looking back a little on, the challenges around the pandemic and, what that posed to you and your day-to-day job. I'm guessing quite a few challenges.
Yeah, quite a few for everyone. The first thing was to make sure that everybody could work. Everybody that needed to could work remotely. Fortunately, we had pretty good DR, and we were reasonably well set up for remote access. But I must say, I do remember seeing, I was on a BBC website right at the start of the crisis, before it was really a crisis for us, and seeing a time-lapse video of the Chinese building a hospital in Wuhan. I think they built a hospital in 10 days for 1,000 beds or something like that. And it was probably that really triggered me to say, you know what, it's one thing to have DR process on paper. Let's make sure we're absolutely ready for that. So we made sure we tested our remote access. When the capability was there, we made sure we would have the capacity for everybody to come in remotely, made sure we had all the multi-factor authentication sorted out, so that we were good to go. So I think we were ready on that side. The other thing was just we were using Skype, struggling with Skype, as many companies were, I think, at the time, and we were ready to go to Teams, but we hadn't. And we'd even got all the training documentation ready to go. And so we accelerated that course. And the adoption was great. Funny how a crisis can accelerate adoption levels, isn't it?
That's very true. And spoken to some of our member organisations that the pandemic almost kind of drove them in adoption and, if you like, change their policy going forward from an IT and remote working perspective forward what would have normally taken 2 years in 2 weeks, because you had to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was the same in healthcare. I remember having virtual GP calls during that time as well. And so it's, so you can push that too far, but I think some of that remote capability is really going to change the way, lots of sectors operate. And beyond that, it was just about keeping team togetherness, the regular check-ins, end-of-day catch-ups, morning meetings, coffee mornings, these types of things, just to keep a level of connectivity. It was a really close-knit team based in Bolton, all pretty much working in one office. So to try and recreate that culture virtually was tricky, but we gave it a good go.
Thanks for that, Ian. And, where do you go for help when you require advice on SAP-related matters?
So our first port of call is always to our incumbent support partner. We moved to NTT Data a couple of years ago, well, over the last couple of years certainly, and we've been very, very happy to have made that move. So that'll always be our first port of call, but we will also ask SAP directly, and whilst that's in the past has been patchy, I have to say, we have a really good account director right now, and I feel pretty well supported. And also a specific, I would say, during our recent SuccessFactors implementation, as there always are, there were some sticky moments, and SAP were really responsive during those times. And beyond that, we have connections with other businesses that use SAP through the user group, and also other SAP partners that we've built relationships with over the years that perhaps a bit more niche or have an expertise in one particular area of SAP. So use of the user group and the connections we make through that and other niche partners is a factor into it as well.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of quite an important, I suppose, building of your network and engagement in that community, be it SAP partner, that user group, which is obviously community of customers as well. That whole network is there to help and support. And how would you kind of rate the level of support? I think you said there you've been very well supported. Obviously, you said you moved to NTT in the past couple of years or so, and you also speak to SAP Direct. How would you rate the level of support provided by software vendors and IT partners, generally?
Yeah, generally, support from partners is pretty good. I think from time to time they can be a bit stretched. Have they taken on too much work? That's not NTT, by the way, but I do think that one or two recent experiences would say that working on capacity management and demand management within the partner base would be a good thing. I do think perhaps people are overstretched sometimes or in growth, so that's something to watch. There's also the usual concern about specific people that are allocated to projects by partners. Some consultants are better than others, and a couple of times recently we have needed to feedback concerns about consultants that have been on projects and swap out those to ensure we get a good result. But in terms of software vendors, for SAP, I would say they've improved enormously during the 7 years I've been in this role. I can remember days when SAP used to talk about empathy, but I now think it's a lot more real than it was back when I took up the role. So that's encouraging. And with respect to other vendors, I think it varies quite a bit. And I don't know what you think, but I think that can depend a little bit on the relative size of the organisation. Warburtons, we might be a big UK brand, but we're not a global business. We're a mid-sized business, really. And I think that how we're seen by vendors can sometimes affect the service that we get, and that's something, and that plays into some of our partnering decisions actually, to make sure that we're going to be considered a worthy customer, if you like, and I think that works in the end.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I suppose I'll ask you this as such. It's kind of an assumption for me based on one of my long-held beliefs that, you do business with people you like, and, that people-to-people connection. You've mentioned the network that you built and relationships that you built. And if you've got really good relations, be it with SAP, be it with your partner, I would assume, rightly or wrongly, that you will get good service because you've built that relationship. Am I right or am I wrong?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, so when I think back to my view of SAP over the last 7 years, you can't separate the fact that I was new myself 7 years ago, so I didn't have relationships, and it takes time to build those. So, maybe SAP had more empathy than I realised 7 years ago, and maybe that was just because I was new. So it's a very, very valid point. But partnerships, I think that's absolutely right. I think partnerships and personal relationships do make a difference, and that's something within our IT strategy at Warburtons I see as important, not only with vendors and external partners, but also internally. When I joined the team 7 years ago, we were a really good IT department, but not necessarily as connected with the business as I would have liked. And we created some new IT business partner roles to be that bridge and to create that connection, because I think it's through those relationships internally, never mind externally, that we've been able to drive some of the value that we've had over the last 7 years at technology, and wouldn't have been the case without those relationships being in place.
Yeah, and that's quite true. We're seeing it's almost like the rise of the business relationship manager, so to speak. We've seen it in certainly recent years that we cannot silo those parts of the business, IT, the business or whatever, because of the way the world's going, especially with cloud. That both IT and the business have to work together, and the needs, potentially someone or something within the business to bridge that gap, because sometimes perhaps we speak different languages across the two, and someone needs to bring them together.
Yeah, for sure. And the dirty word is shadow IT, and there's no such thing as shadow IT. It's all good now. Shadow IT is where lots of good ideas come from. But certainly in the past, even in Warburtons, we would see shadow IT as a bad thing. But somebody asked me this at the conference the other week. What kind of shadow IT have you got? And I said, well, I think the IT team are pretty aware of the technology aspirations that our business functions have, because we're close enough. We're out with them in their meetings, hearing their plans and helping to shape their plans. So the idea that a commercial team or the logistics team would go off and do something in isolation, it's pretty rare, actually. And I think that is because of the partner and relationships we've got that probably we didn't have in the past.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and just going back to what we were talking about there about the community and network, and obviously focusing on, if you like, the UKISUG community, and you joined the UKISUG board earlier this year, so congratulations on your success in the directors election, first of all. But what made you make that decision to throw your hat in the ring to join the UKISUG board?
Yeah, well, thanks first of all, and we're just at the start, but I'm really looking forward to playing a role. I think the user group's really important. When I've been in the job 7 years, but so 7.5 years ago, kind of my first IT conference was the user group conference, and most of my team from then is still in IT now, and they took me along to that as my first induction to that arena. So I have fond memories of the part that the user group can play right from the start, even before I entered IT. But I think getting impartial advice and best practice sharing between peers is a great way to drive improvement and to give something back at next to no cost. And I came to IT fairly late in my career, and I've always been impressed by the openness and preparedness to meet up that industry peers have in IT. I don't think that happens the same way in other business functions. I never used to do that when I was in supply chain. No, that wasn't really a thing in the finance team. So I think we have something special in the IT profession. with the preparedness to do that kind of sharing. And for me, the user group is a great way to channel that willingness to share.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, again, welcome, and certainly glad you threw your hat in the ring, and looking forward to the future, driving even more benefit to the community through your role on the board. And
I'll tell you what, actually, just related to that, I think that there is a job for leaders to do, and I have to look at myself in this respect, because we've been a member of the user group for years, and we've taken part and not taken part, and our input has varied. But of course, now by being on the board, the first thing I do is say, well, better make sure that my team are playing a part and making sure that they're contributing. But so I do think, though, that it is the job of leaders to kind of push and encourage their team members to play an active role in the user group and to contribute. And I think that that's an important challenge for the user group, to find a way to unlock that commitment from IT leaders, to get the IT leaders to make that encouragement. So I don't have the answers for that yet, but it's certainly something that I think we should focus on, and I think will give us a good result.
And I would agree. I've just had that conversation internally earlier today, to be honest with you, on how we do that and looking for ideas. So we'll certainly follow up on that conversation. So I'll be seeing you very soon as well in person. So we can certainly have that conversation a bit more.
Yeah, let's do that.
So just kind of moving on and kind of moving back to SAP and SAP projects in particular now. What should organisations avoid doing when it comes to SAP projects, in your opinion?
Okay, well, because I've said a bit about my background, you'll know that my answer won't be along technology lines. That's not my speciality. But I think one would definitely be avoid going it alone with the IT team. Most IT projects are business projects, not always, but mostly. And I feel strongly that any tech-enabled initiative should have a business owner, a business sponsor, and that will ensure benefits are realised. Any new processes are owned and adopted and become embedded in the organisation. Because we have had a couple of examples in my time at Warburtons where we've IT have overly led on initiatives, and it's become an IT project, and then the adoption hasn't followed, and I wouldn't say quite that they've failed, but they've not had the success that they would have otherwise done. So we need to play our role, but we shouldn't feel that we always need to lead on technology initiatives. I think that's a mistake.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
And I have a couple of other thoughts. I mean, related to that, actually, I think that it's really important that the business function that gets the benefit should own the relevant technology costs.
Yeah.
If a technology development will give improvements to the commercial team, then I think the commercial team should take the cost of the implementation, but also the ongoing costs. And I think that's a good way to ensure adoption and that we get the benefits. It's all too easy for a department outside IT to ask for some technology capability. So it would be great if IT could just pay for it. For me, that's a recipe for non-adoption, and we need to tread carefully in that area.
Yeah, it's like back to that ownership element, isn't it? Ownership, adoption. If you feel ownership, you'll more likely engage and adopt and utilise what's being implemented.
Yeah, and I have another one, actually, which I can definitely point at myself in this regard. Something else to avoid doing is to avoid overcomplicating scope. This is something that I've fallen foul of myself in my supply chain days. Some of our supply chain planning capability that I started when I was in a supply chain job and helped to finish in the IT job, it's really, really good. But I think with my supply chain hat on, I expected a bit much. I had a vision for a really grand thing, and that meant it took a really long time to get some of these capabilities implemented. And there was a couple of times where it was taking so long that we almost gave up. We didn't in the end, and we've got some great solutions now. But I do think working hard to minimise, it's minimum viable product or whatever, it's starting, get a firm base, get that in as quick as possible, and then build on it. And I think the recent Commerce Cloud and Sales and Service Cloud implementations that we've done we absolutely worked with that in mind. We have something that's already delivering business benefit, but there's lots more functionality we can go at in there, and we'll iterate to that over time.
Excellent. Thank you. And finally, as we come towards a close now, if you looked into your crystal ball, what do you think will be the biggest change we'll see in IT? And I'll also throw business in there, potentially IT or business, in the next 5 years.
Okay. I guess that could be answered in a number of different contexts, but I need to be realistic. Quantum computing is probably not going to transform the world of Warburtons in the next 5 years. So I'm not going to use that example. But there is one concept that I'm really excited about, actually. It's reasonably new, and I think it's one that will become widely adopted over the next 5 years. And that's the concept of a digital twin. I even like the term. That being a digital representation of a thing or a business process or a system that can help you simulate and model and plan out, for a range of different scenarios, what the likely outcomes are for real-world assets or real-world business processes. And that, for me, leads into something related to that, which I think Gartner called decision intelligence, where human decision-making processes can be simulated in digital form, and by overlaying AI on that, it can help to make better system-wide decisions for the long term or in a moment. So we're doing some exploratory work on the digital twin concept within our supply chain right now. It's early days, but it's something, and with my supply chain background, I'm really excited about it. And whilst SAP will not be where we do that, the real world data feeds from our SAP system will be an essential ingredient to making that digital twin concept work for us.
Oh, wow. Well, it certainly does, and I look forward to hearing about that as you go through that process. But I must admit, when you start talking about digital twins, I thought you were going to make a holographic version of yourself, so you can work from the beach and your digital twin pops into the office.
I don't know if that'll quite be in time for my retirement, but possible. We'll work on
it. Ian, thank you very much. I'd like to really thank you for your time, for your thoughts and for your insights. It's been really valuable to me and a really good discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it. And to our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed listening and found value in the conversation. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening. And please make sure you hit that plus button at the top of the screen and subscribe so you don't miss any more future senior IT leader interviews. And until the next time, stay safe, stay well, and keep washing your hands.